Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I am the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. It is Tuesday, June 13th, and joining me is not Josh Mansfield. No, not this week. Joining me is former co-host with me, Jamie Thomas. Jamie, great to have you back. How are you, my friend?
What's up, buddy? It's great to be back. Thanks for having me. We're doing well here, man. I'm sweating it out down in old Baton Rouge these days. Not having to deal with quite the air quality stuff you're having to deal with up there, man. Did that stuff clear out or what?
Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy. It did. I know that since you lived in San Francisco that you've experienced some of the like crazy clouds and smoke. I mean, it was orange outside my window for a day last week.
And it wasn't like a SF Giant stunt.
No,
you're on the wrong side of the country for that.
I was hoping for that, but you know, I think we got to be a few more games above 500 for them to start rolling that out in New York. Yeah, it was crazy. But by the weekend, it was nice, and honestly, I spent the whole weekend outside. It was beautiful.
Awesome. Well, that's good, because I was about to say you're gonna have to get one of those. Have you seen those crazy products, the like Dyson headphones with like the air purifier mouth thing? It's the most ridiculous product. Look this up after this, but it's like it would have had one good use, and it was the orange day in the city. That would have been good.
Basically, it's like a personal air purifier.
Yeah. It looks like something out of Star Wars almost, like just full-on headphones and like a full-on air purifier. It's wild.
What a crazy company. They have all the weird products. Well, we've got some stuff to get to today. DDO is coming up this weekend. Next up on the Elite Series, we're on the march towards the European swing, and this past weekend we had the Zootown Open. For those wondering, Josh unfortunately couldn't make it to the tournament. He was planning to go, but got sick right before he was set to leave.
Oh no!
So yeah, I know. I mean, he was like looking forward to this tournament for months. But you know what? The final round of MPO was canceled due to lightning, so not the worst tournament to miss, I suppose. Josh will be back next week. By the way, he's city council duties this week. So Jamie, let's talk a little Zootown. Kristin Tattar wins again. I know, dirt off the shoulder. I mean, it has been truly a remarkable run, and it just keeps on going. And you know, Josh and I both picked Kristin this week, and like, how do you not just pick her all the time?
I mean, you do just pick her all the time right now. It's pretty crazy because she's doing things that would run counter to like the traditional thing, staying in rhythm, staying on tour, warming up. I mean, you know, obviously when you have an injury, you have to think about those things a little differently than, you know, some of these other young guns we'll talk about on the MPO side, but it just doesn't seem to matter. She takes time off, she recharges, she comes back, and she just, you know, maybe has a round at the beginning and end of her trips that aren't quite to her standard, which is now the standard, but she's the standard. It's crazy.
Yeah, you know, she was 5 strokes better than anybody else in the field from strokes gained tee to green. You don't need the stats to know that. You can watch her playing and watch her throwing these majestic shots on this mountain course, which is beautiful, by the way. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't know that this has a future as an Elite Series, but I want to have a mountain course be a part of the Elite Tour. I think it would be nice.
If nothing else, like at least it shows, and this, in no way am I saying anything about what Sean Jack and Sean Mercy are doing at OTB, but like when I see OTB and I'm like, that's not the golf that the West Coast plays. Like Portland gets a little better. Obviously, Beaver State Fling is a classic. Having something like Zootown that gets a little more of that like elevation and ruggedness and the stuff that, you know, West Coast players are really used to, unless you kind of live down in the LA, San Diego area. But like we're used to that ruggedness. I still say we. But exactly, like give us some of that, you know. It's great to see.
Big sky disc golf.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to have that and feel like when you're watching, obviously when you're playing, but even if you're just watching on DGN, like, wow, this is like, I can enjoy the nature experience here, which is very different from dense woods of East Coast, or, you name it, wide fairways of Europe, etc. But yeah, Kristin, I mean, we could go through the stats again and again. It's just she's playing on another level from everybody else right now. And, Missy Gannon played great to finish in second. Really solid. I think the best putter. I guess Deanne Carey slightly edges her out in the putting department, but Missy goes 83 and 22 on the putting green. Never misses a scramble, hardly has a bogey, and it just isn't in position enough to beat Kristin right now. And I mean, that's kind of been the story for just about everybody when Kristin has showed up and played her B+ or better game.
And that's the crazy thing that Kristin's really done to the FPO division lately is before, in the previous few years, especially when I was on the show with you, we were always talking about the ceiling. We had the big, will Paige reach 1,000? And, look at, Katrina and Paige and whoever else shooting 1030, 1040 rounds. It was always about the ceiling and where that's at. What Kristin, I think, has really done to this narrative is turn it into how high is your floor? When you're not on and I'm not on, are you going to be able to beat me? Because if you look at the eye test, like you're saying, just the dispersion on her shots is minimal. The consistency is so right there, even on not the best days. It's kind of interesting how we went from this like rocket ship, how high can you fly, to like, okay, but what's the weakest link in the chain going to be for you?
Yeah, and I think the problem is that her ceiling is also higher than everybody else's right now.
That helps.
So like the floor is the highest and the ceiling is the highest. And so like it requires her to really have a down weekend for her to lose. It's incredibly impressive.
And let me ask you this. Is there any part of her game that you would say she is the absolute heads above best at in any individual part of the game?
No.
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, I take it back. I think her forehand upshots might be number one in the field.
But she's even admitted she's relied on her forehand less now than in previous years. So, but still, point well made. But that's the crazy part. It's about having a high ceiling and a high floor, and it's not, okay, I'm going to have a greater variety of shots than just anybody else. So like people are going to be in a position they don't know how to attack. Like you're having all these players who are very capable of attacking these courses that they're playing and scoring really well. It's just doing it round after round after round after round.
Yeah, it almost feels robotic, and that's I think what's so impressive is that she just goes out and just executes and executes and executes every time at a high level, and it just makes her very difficult to stop. Now, all the caveats you want about this being a silver event, sparsely attended. A lot of people dropped last minute. I think one of the smallest tournaments we've had all season on tour. And it makes sense. It's a long trip from Portland to Kansas. And to add in the Missoula stop is a lot of extra driving and then a short turnaround to DDO. So I totally get that. On the other hand, it doesn't really stop the fact that I still think Kristin would have won if everybody, all the top players on the planet were there.
There's no reason to doubt it. There's no reason to doubt it.
On the MPO side, so the FPO side, they got their full 3 rounds in, but Thunderstorms ended up canceling the final round for MPO. And that means that for the first time, we have another new winner. Evan Scott gets his first Disc Golf Pro Tour win. He beats Clay Edwards by 4 strokes after shooting a magnificent 12 under second round, where he even had a bogey. So 13 birdies. He was cashing putts from deep. He was in the circle all the time. He was making up for mistakes with great upshots. I mean, just truly impressive. And, this has been one of these young players coming up who has showed promise. And we've already talked about him a little bit this season, but now he's got his first Pro Tour win. Wow. What an impressive young player, and, still under 18.
And it's just another one in the crop of these great players who just don't seem to have a problem transitioning from, whether it's the local league, the regional championship, the amateur world champion from 2021, and then coming onto the scene and winning a Pro Tour event. I mean, the thing that might make him stand out is he the fastest from like a junior or amateur title to a tour win? We didn't prep this stat.
Gannon's got to be right there.
Gannon's, yeah.
I'd have to look it up, but it's got to be up there. I mean, but it feels like we have more and more players right now who are in that conversation with Isaac Robinson and Gannon. And like, he is just another one of these extremely talented players who's been playing for, at least 5 years at local C tiers and junior events and whatnot, who is transitioning to tour. And like you say, just not showing any signs of being nervous about it. We didn't really get to see him in a true final round.
Yeah.
And how would that have looked? But he had a 4-stroke lead. I mean, I think he was certainly the favorite to win going into that final round if it had happened. And it's just like the level of overall skill. We talk about high floor. These young kids have all learned how to throw elite forehands, elite backhands. They practice their putting. They've watched all of the YouTube tutorials. They started with that instead of having to learn that themselves. And now we're seeing it like, it feels like every week we're talking about primarily players under the age of 25 and being at the top of the leaderboard. And that includes people who feel like tour veterans, Jamie.
Yeah. I mean, how many, we were talking about it before the show, like how many people are in their early mid 20s that you just off the top of your head, you're like, oh, he's 30, 32. He's been around for so long. Eagle McMahon, that old guy, like the guy probably still has to, what is it, car insurance? Like you can't rent cars before you're 25 or whatever.
Be 25, otherwise you got to pay the big fees.
Yep. This is how old we are now, Charlie, that we've forgotten all this. But yeah, I mean, it's just like seeing these young kids come onto this scene and they already have the game. They're not coming onto tour and like figuring out the game and sort of developing it along the way. And of course they are, but they're coming on with a level that we haven't really seen before. And it really just, it's crazy to think how fast it's happening. I don't want to be cliche, but what else do you say to it?
Well, I mean, let's look at like what we've talked about this season, right? Ricky and Paul have largely been footnotes to the year. Paul is interesting because he's doing this European thing, but he hasn't really been in the mix. Ricky, we've been talking about the injury. He started to pick it back up a little bit, but we haven't seen peak Ricky. Chris Dickerson isn't touring right now because we're on the West Coast. He's not really been a major factor for the most part. Like the storylines have been, okay, sure, Calvin Heimberg. Calvin's still pretty young.
Yeah.
He's in his late 20s at this point. And then, Isaac Robinson, 23, I think. He was 22 at Worlds last year. Gannon Burr, under 20. Mm-hmm. Now we have Evan Scott. Even guys like Adam Hammis and Anthony Barella and Aaron Gossage. These guys are all super young still.
Yeah.
And it feels like we know it. They feel older because we've known their names for 5 or 6 years in some cases. But we knew them because they were the prodigies of the past. And now they're stepping into these bigger spotlights. But like, I think we got to get used to it, Jamie. Like, I feel like we maybe are, sure, the stars of 5 years ago are still going to win some tournaments, but I don't think it's going to be commonplace anymore. Not the way the tour has developed over the last couple of years.
Right. I mean, and even look at the guy that we thought was going to start winning everything, go back a generation and a half maybe and talk about Simon Lizotte. And it took him until last year to get that big multi-win season, multi-win campaign under his belt. So yeah, definitely these players can still win, but they're facing realistic threats, not just at the silver level, not just the elite level, but the playoffs, the majors. I mean, It's pretty incredible. You were just naming Isaac Robinson, Gannon Burke, Calvin Heimberg. I think if I just said, hey, you have to blind pick a podium in MPO, you don't get to know the course, the time of year, or the tier, like that's a pretty safe podium. It's going to do you well most of the time there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you mentioned it, like at the majors, right? Let's look at Champions Cup. It was Robinson, Eagle, Nicholas Antela, Silas Schultz, Mason Ford, and then Matt Oram tied for 5th with Mason. That's your top 5. So you got the old school Matty O
holding it down.
But then you got a bunch of guys who were young.
Yeah.
And if you look at Portland, Adam Hammis, Eric Gossage, Anthony Barella, Isaac Robinson. Okay, James Proctor. He's in the mix. And then Alden Harris. Almost all those guys are super young, except for Proctor.
Yeah.
So there are some like cool storylines for some of these, you know, more veteran type players. But for the most part, over the last, well, really the entire season, but particularly in the last month, 6 weeks, it's just been like a nonstop onslaught of guys who are 25 or under.
Yeah. And Proctor might still qualify for 25 and under. If he's over 25, he's not much. He's kind of one of those guys like Heimberg. Like he's a veteran. He's been around. People know him. So you think he's a couple years older than he is, but he's not that far removed from school. So
he's born in 95. So that makes him...
That'll be 20.
Late 20s?
Yeah.
Right?
Be turning 28 this year.
There you go.
So, okay. Still in his 20s. Hey, great. Before you hit that 30 mark, that's that athletic point that we talk about all the time, right? It's 30s when you're trying to get that 10-year one last contract like Paul and Simon did. But I was playing golf with Silas Schultz the other day, actually, and we were talking a lot about Champions Cup. And it was, you know, kind of ties into this. It was really interesting how he said, you know, I was getting comments. People were asking like, oh, were you nervous after, you know, shooting that first round and all this stuff? And he's like, no, like I honestly, I mean, of course I'm nervous to play on the lead card. There's that anticipation of playing lead card major. Those are never going to go away. But I knew I could play and I knew I could be there and, you know, swim with those sharks. Right. So that's the other part that's unsaid about this is when you see these young kids coming onto the scene with those fully developed games, they also have fully developed confidence. And I guess, you know, shout out to all the people who are putting together amateur and junior competitions that have allowed them to like cut their teeth and get to the point where you can be 20 years old playing on the vaunted fairways of, you know, the IDGC and be completely able to handle the moment and, you know, give it a stab, even if you don't come away with the title ultimately.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I think, you know, the question, of course, is this a sea change, right? Are we in the middle of the actual changeover from the era of Paul and Ricky? And is it now, are we in a new era? And the question, the secondary question is it the Calvin Heimberg era? Or is it like the new world where different people win all the time? And I think it's a little early to make that call one way or the other, but certainly Paul McBeth doesn't want us to let us think that he's done yet. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Is there any part of you, because you've been around the sport long enough, you've been watching disc golf long enough, is there any part of you that still wants the old guard to like pick up a few wins and sort of like keep you know what I mean? Like this is not a slight at anybody, but like there's so many pandemic golfers. There's so many people who are just getting into it that are like, oh, this young kid is the best and that guy's terrible. And you know, like there's a part of me that just wants the old guys to like, and they're not even old, but I'm calling them the old guys, hang in there, win a couple, and just like give us this even keel year between the generations to like argue about for a few more months, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and the fact is the ratings, if McBeth is, you know, up at the top at the European Open, the ratings will be fantastic compared to if it's Adam Hammis versus Aaron Gossage again. And, you know, it's even hard sometimes to pinpoint exactly why that is. I think those who've been around the game long enough, and pretty much anybody knows who Paul McBeth is, it's like you see these moments of magic that it feels like only a few guys can really conjure. So when he hits the putt last year at Worlds, you know, I mean, that's just like that kind of stuff. You can't, not everybody's making that. You know, you give certain guys 10 tries, 20 tries, they're not going to hit it. So I think there's something about that, but also there's something about just like the level of dominance over time. And, you know, it's like, I want to see LeBron James do incredible things in the NBA. Like, am I prepared to say Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA? Well, I think I am after what we just saw in the playoffs. Congratulations to Denver Nuggets fans everywhere, by the way. But it's like weird to see that changeover happening, and it's kind of uncomfortable if you've gotten used to a certain way of sort of expecting things to be.
Snooze the alarm. Just five more minutes of LeBron doing his thing.
Right.
You know, five more minutes of Kobe, or, you know, whoever your horse is and whatever your sport is, right?
But, you know, once upon a time, it was like, oh, we're going to Worlds. Time to pick McBeth. And like, are we still there? Maybe it's like in the conversation, but I don't think it's not a just close your eyes and pick Kristin type situation. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, FPO is completely different. That's for sure. FPO, we're in a new generation. There's a new way to play the game, and study Tattar's textbook right now.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about McBeth, and we've also got some discussion about the DGN entertainment stuff that Jamie is working on. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
At Pound, the quality of our gear runs deeper than the stitching. That's why we make everything right here in the US, employing highly skilled, well-paid professionals. From bomb-proof Cordura fabric to YKK zippers and recycled plastics, we source the highest quality US materials to make the most comfortable, durable pack in disc golf. Our lifetime warranty stays with the pack, not the purchaser. So regardless of how you find us, we will be here to make sure your pack stays on the course and out of the landfill. Pound's integrity is held together with more than just thread.
Welcome back to the Upshot. So today is PDGA Ratings Update Day. I hope everybody got a little parcel of good news. A couple interesting notes to get to. I think number one for me, Mauri Vilman from Estonia, who, if you haven't been paying attention, has been shredding over on the European side of the pond. And his rating goes up 13 points to 1022. Now, there's nothing particularly unusual about going up 13 points, of course, but to go from, you know, down in the low thousands, Jamie, to 1022 in one jump up 13 points shows you just how well he's been playing for the last month.
He's had a lot of rounds up in that 1040, 1050, 1060 last couple months. I mean, and honestly, I had not heard this name before, and you told me. And coming from Estonia, I don't want to like jump the gun and draw too many conclusions here, but let's just say at this point, like, you love to see another country putting up a lot of talent.
I mean, and, you know, we'll see if he's going to be somebody who might be in the mix at the European Open. I mean, he's got to be considered one of the top European contenders at this point. He's now won an EPT event. He won the Copenhagen Open back in May. Then he won the Helsinki Prodigy Disc Pro Tour event. And we talked, I think, last week about the fact that he won the Estonian Open after qualifying in the Monday qualifier.
Wow.
He was ahead at the Nokia Open. He had a really bad final round, ended up finishing second. But, I mean, that shows you kind of what kind of a heater he's been on.
Wow. Monday qualifier to tournament champion. That's hats off to that.
Happened in FBO too.
Wow.
Crazy.
Estonia. Come on now. I was just looking up to see when Mauri is going to cross paths with our friend Paul McBeth here. Looks like it's not until the European Open. They're not both are playing events before then, but they're not playing in the same events. So that would have been cool. Because if they met in one of these, I don't want to say smaller events, but smaller events, they're both going to end up on a feature card together. And why would you not do that? So that's what I was kind of hoping for. But so far, European Open is the place.
It's going to make that event even more exciting.
Would you put him on a lead card right now?
On like on a feature?
Yeah, feature.
100%.
You just want to see.
100%. Who like you're at the European Open, right? You're going to pick the feature card.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have at least one, if not two Europeans on the card. Who are you putting above him? I mean, obviously there's the European players competing over in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Nicholas Antela probably
you got to think he's on there.
Would be the right guy.
Yeah.
So you go Antela, you go McBeth, you go Villman, and you go Eagle if he's playing. Right?
Yeah.
That's fire right there. It's done. I've done the job for you.
You're welcome.
Whoever decides the tournament.
I'll send an email.
That's right. So McBeth technically is not the highest rated player in the world. That's still Manabu Kajiyama, but we all understand that that's not legit. McBeth is back to being number one at 1046. He went up by 2 points. He is 2 points ahead of Ricky Wysocki, and Wysocki is 1 spot ahead of Gannon Burr and Calvin Heimberg. Kristin Tattar up to an all-time high of 992.
Ooh.
So slowly, maybe inching her way towards 1,000 rated. Still a long way to go.
Feeling some deja vu there where we've been talking about an FPO player getting to 1,000 and like getting into the 990s. I seem to remember there's an old bet. I had an old bet back in the day on the Upshot. When you go in the archives,
you definitely owe somebody something.
I think the term was Paige's playing career, which was very expressly in my advantage. So the bet's still on. But
you need a major turnaround at this point.
Right now, she is evangelizing disc golf at Bonnaroo and not competing in silver events. So like her getting to 1,000 is not looking good because she's doing other great things for disc golf. But I still want to win that bet after all these years.
So McBeth, by the way, played this past weekend at another European event. And after one of his worst performances in quite some time, maybe his worst in like a decade, he showed up at Pro Forester. He posted on Instagram that his drives had never felt better in his practice rounds, and he proceeded to win the tournament by 8 strokes over Jakub Semerad, averaging around 1067-ish, maybe 1068. I mean, really, really strong showing from McBeth, who had it firing on all cylinders, which it's so crazy to watch him go from one week to the next, play like so poorly, and then play at, an absolutely top of the world level.
Yeah, I'm glad you read out the ratings there, because at first, and Jakub's actually played decently over in the States this year at points, but, winning by 8, and I'm like, well, what's the field strength? In the 1060s, you're only a stroke per round off of winning scores in the States on the biggest tour events. Still if you average 1070s in the tournament, you're a pretty safe bet for at least a podium.
Oh, yeah. You're probably going to win unless it's an unusual course.
So, that's still, he's tracking. He's within 1 stroke of winning pace over in the States. And obviously ratings, they're dependent on the strength of the field a bit as well. Funny enough. So we'll talk about DGN Entertainment. I'll give you a little preview. We are going to have some content coming out with Paul McBeth on this European trip later in the year. So DGN subscribers, definitely stay tuned for that. Joey Tamale is over there producing that, and he's traveling with Paul throughout his European tour. He actually called me and told me something very similar. He said after that, because Joey Tamale, I'll give him his flowers here, he actually beat Paul McBeth in that tournament that Paul didn't play very well in.
Right.
And then they were practicing, and Joey called me and he said, Paul figured it out. He just turned around, figured it out. And I'm like, okay, hold on. This is still GOAT talk. Because, how are you over in Europe and you just had, the worst performance of your life? And he's going to be fired up by that. You know, you're not in your house, you're not in your element, you're traveling country to country to country, you're meeting dignitaries and playing courses and checking in on your foundation, but you just suddenly had time to fix and make your drive better than it's ever been. Like, how do you unlock these secrets to playing that well?
I think, you know, this is why he's the greatest to ever do it. It's because when you playing a game that requires the level of technical precision of disc golf, to play it at the highest level like that, you have to have some ability to like self-diagnose issues. And I think players who can do that quickly and get over any kind of like mental hurdles of it, that's a rare skill. That's not a skill that everybody has. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, like, look at the stats from this weekend. He hit 57% birdie percentage. He was 8 strokes better tee to green than Semerad. Putter was on fire. Hit 44% of his circle 2 putts. Look out. Like, as much as it's easy to say, oh, you know, now he's back all the way. I'm not going to say that. But you also know that he has that capacity to have it click. And then all of a sudden, he's winning a major. And it doesn't matter how he's played the last 6 months. Sometimes he just has to like have it click into place, and then we get like 6 weeks of insane McBeth. And maybe this is the start of that.
And you know his focus, he said it in the media in the past year or so, that it's about the majors. That's what he's focused on. You know, there's that big, it's not a beef, but we like to call it a beef. You know, Ricky says it's whoever wins more tour events. Paul says it's whoever wins the majors. So I think that argument is going to be alive and well, and is going to be even healthier with what we talked about with this young crop of players as we get into the deeper parts of the season.
Before we jump over to some other stuff, we'll wrap up with the kind of upcoming stuff on DGN, Jamie. Quickly for the picks, Josh had Calvin Heimberg in MPO. Calvin dropped. Sorry, Josh. I had James Conrad. I was like, first round, I was like, oh, baby, James is going to do it. And then, yeah, he played fine. Finished 5th. Who knows what would have happened with the final round. We both had Kristin in FPO, so we both pick up 5 points for that. I got to give credit to Mr. Dallin Blanchard, who I never should have doubted, who easily finished inside the top 10, finished in 5th, 1037 rated. He's the 12th highest rated player in the world.
And has
Why am I doubting this guy on his home turf?
Yeah.
That's just not smart. That's just not smart.
That's fundamentals, Charlie. Don't doubt the man at home. 1030 plus, you can't doubt him at home. 1010,
what am I?
Maybe.
That's 100%. So, Jamie, we also got to do a little purse watch and our whole 18 reviews. Purse watch, Zootown Open. Total purse $34,622. $3,250 going to the MPO winner, $2,200 to Kristin Tattar. That's up almost 600% from 2022 when this tournament was a B tier and had a purse of $5,165.
Wow.
Overall, though, Jamie, this was the lowest purse on the tour this year, coming in about $10,000 less than Beaver State Fling, also a silver. And got a note. Important note, there are a lot fewer players at this tournament than we've seen at other stops so far this year. So that obviously affects the total purse quite a bit. This doesn't feel particularly out of line in one direction or the other in terms of purse.
Yeah, and I'll take the glass half full side here, and to go from a B tier to the standards that the Disc Golf Pro Tour has for purse, I mean, you have to invest a lot more, just straight up, in the infrastructure to put on an event. I mean, and this, again, it's not even an A tier, it's a B tier to tour stop. So, you know, congratulations to the event team out there to put that on, because it's incredibly demanding. And to then increase the purse 600%, you know, I know they had to work really hard just to pull off that feat. So that's the angle I'll take on that.
And then we got the hole 18 reviews. Jamie, I know you haven't done this before, so I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts on hole 18 from the Zootown Open?
Beautiful. First word that comes to mind. Just gorgeous. You love to stand on a tee and see the horizon. and then actually have to throw the disc below the horizon. That's a challenge. It's a challenge. And, to not get caught up in the moment, probably for Kristin, if it were a little closer, it would have been a little more, heart stopping. It's nice to have a 4-stroke lead going into a hole like that. But, just really beautiful first shot. There's nothing wrong with the scenery. Where I kind of thought the hole could have been stronger is that second shot. I couldn't tell how much you get from pressing off of the tee. So how important is that second shot? Can you just lay it up, chunk it up there, give it a birdie run if you're MPO, eagle run if you're FPO for the 3? It maybe not quite as much drama, but it's also the first year that it's on tour. So
your scores?
Solid 7. I'm a sucker for good looks when it comes to finishing up a disc golf course.
I'll tell you what, that's exactly the number I have. 7s across the board. There's just enough intrigue with the OB along the right-hand side to force players to execute 2 good shots. Now, it's pretty much should be a birdie for most players. And if you're going to get a bogey, it's probably because you made kind of either you threw it OB off the tee, you threw it OB on your second shot. But no one should be taking worse than a bogey. There's not a ton then of scoring separation. It kind of comes down to accuracy and hitting the putt, which detracts from the hole overall. But it's just so attractive as a hole, and it's still like an interesting hole that requires 2 good shots. And there are 2 lines on the approach shot. You can go like forehand to the left side or hyzer to the right side. But it's not, it can't really get above a 7 because it just doesn't offer an eagle opportunity or like the chances for things to get too out of hand. It's like pretty straightforward to take a par if you want to play for that. So, but it's still just it's a very pleasant hole to watch be played, and that's got to count for something.
Yeah, I wonder I think how golf sometimes, and we don't use rough quite the same way they do, but if you're playing a golf course, right, and you need to shorten a landing zone, oftentimes you'll just let the rough grow out so that your ball has to carry a certain distance. We kind of use OB for that. I wonder if instead of having OB down the right side, that you actually wrap the OB and you kind of turn it into an island, like it's a fairway plus green island. So there's like a minimum distance you have to carry.
Yeah, there's like an OB river across the middle, essentially.
Yeah, and if you were thinking about that, like, okay, I can't just chip it short. I can't just bail out on the hyzer. Like, I've got to hit this like giant bean shape that does go all the way to the green, but I have to get it in bounds or I'm teeing again. Would that increase that sort of need to go for it and put something on that drive a little more?
Little more pressure on the tee shot. I think it's not a bad idea.
Just armchair designing here.
Speaking of rough, I played disc golf on Friday over at FDR State Park, one of the best courses in the New York City metropolitan area. That's a generous way to put it. And I had a second shot from like mulch that was like a kind of across the bridge over the creek. Then there was some mulch in the area, and I had to throw from there. And I had enough room to have a run up. And so, I ran up, I planted, but mulch is not ground. Mm-hmm. It's not solid land. So there's a little bit of, you can't really plant as well as you want. This is how we need to create rough in disc golf. We need sand or mulch or high grass or other things that create footwork challenges, as opposed to like, I don't even know what else to call it. Like where your disc lands is not your lie, really,
right,
like it is in golf. So I think it would be very interesting to see a course really approach this in a serious way, where they like put down material, or you could even use stones, although you want to be careful about injury risk and disc damage, I suppose. But how do you make it so that it's really difficult for people to have their footwork? Because it definitely took power off my shot to have to be trying to plant in the mulch.
Yeah, and that's really interesting too. What I like about that is it's also would be visible. If let's say it's mulch, because Nate Heinold did some nice aesthetic things at the D-Glow in recent years with just mulching the fairways and making it look really just beautiful. If that had a strategic component and also a visual component where like you can tell from watching the broadcast that, oh, this player's in the rough, they're not going to want to take a big, aggressive run up at it. You can sort of telegraph's not the right word, but you could sort of preview what's to come and build that suspense, right? That tension.
Absolutely. I mean, straying as the indicator of out of bounds is possibly the worst way to do it. Using actual visual cues of something in the rough that is not just manicured fairway grass. That's where we have to get to.
Yeah.
It will help a great deal. And if we can do it in such a way that it actually creates challenge and not just visual dichotomy, that will be even better.
Man, we've been talking about the players getting so much better, and then after all the years, it's not the courses aren't getting better, but there's definitely a slower evolution to next generation just courses. And this is not tour specific. This is just in general. I think the skill level of even the average rec player out on the disc golf course these days, it's going up so much faster than course evolution is. So I think that's got to be the next domino to fall for to get all the way up to the tour level.
I think I talked about this briefly on the show, but back at the disc golf conference that the Pro Tour hosted back before the season in February, I think one of the most interesting panels that I went to was on course design and like future of course design, and how like the landscaping side of it is like, we're not just clearing out trees in the woods anymore. Mm-hmm. Like it's a full design process that requires, buy-in from the city and from the landowner and from the, et cetera, the environmental people, and thinking about how to actually create a beautiful, challenging course that isn't just relying on thick woods, because that has its own problems. It's not spectator friendly.
Right.
And we've seen what the tour has done, which is like play on a lot of golf courses because it's easier to bring in spectators and for people to see. So pretty interesting. Jamie, you are working on various things for the Disc Golf Network on the non-live side of the the product that is put out there. So Tour Life, and what was the name of the show that y'all did at the end of last year?
On Tour.
Tour Life is Brody and Yuli's podcast. Yeah. On Tour, very cool thing. Is that coming back, or are you going in a different direction this year?
So we sort of pivoted. We're keeping the On Tour brand alive, and we've been sort of doing shorter form things that come out during the season, just trying to get that feeling of Tour Life. Man, I'm so sorry. I keep hitting this mic stand. It's like the fourth time today. The Tour Life as it happens. So there's a benefit to it coming out sort of close to the moment where it happened, because obviously we're in a instant gratification, especially when it comes to media. We want that content. We want it now. So instead of waiting until the off season to put together a big documentary, we decided to release it out in smaller tidbits. I mean, I think the most recent one was following Ella Hansen as she got to go throw out the first pitch at the Portland Pickles game, which if you don't know, if you like the Savannah Bananas, it's that kind of thing, but with a Pacific Northwest vibe. So that is still a thing we're doing. It's possible that we'll bring it back in full documentary form at some point in the future. It's a grind to do stuff like that. And I don't know if you've been watching like Full Swing or Breakpoint on Netflix that are covering like the PGA Tour or, professional tennis, but it's incredible. And I'm proud that we were able to do something that I'd put it up against Full Swing as far as production quality and storylines. But it's a huge lift to do something like that for an entire year. So we decided to pivot a little bit this year.
With budgets that are 1/100th of what they have for the Netflix golf
quite
stuff.
Literally that level.
I don't watch that Full Swing show, but I am going to watch the episode about the merger with PGA and LIV.
Oh.
Because apparently they had cameras at players' houses when players found out on Twitter.com.
Wow. How have we not talked about that this year? We'll have to have a segment for that coming up where we get to go over all that, because I've been incredibly surprised. And since the Pro Tour and the PDGA have merged, I've been paying very close attention to the Live Tour and the PGA and how all that was going down. And to go from something so acrimonious to something just like, oh yeah, we're all friends now and we're all going to put a ton of money into this. And never mind all that beef we were just having. Like, it's all good. It couldn't be more different than how the PDGA and the Pro Tour handled it. But yet, will it be a harmonious result as we've seen on our side? I'm still not totally convinced that they're going to go the path we're going, let's say.
Bizarre. I mean, I think, they say like winning cures everything,
Who won?
Money cures everything as well.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of rumors, right? There's rumors that the PGA Tour really didn't want to get into discovery in the court cases about, like the email that we're sending back and forth about, what to do with players who were playing on Live. And, there was all kinds of like antitrust stuff that could go on there. Who knows? But it is very jarring to see two parties who like were just like at war suddenly be like, yeah, everything's great, and we're going to make a new entity that is co-owned. Crazy. I
don't feel bad for millionaires often, but I find myself feeling bad for Rory McIlroy this week, because I feel like that dude just got thrown under the bus. He planted the flag for him and said, hey, I'm going to be the face of this. I'm going to be your guy. And then he didn't even find out until we found out publicly.
And all these other guys cashed gigantic checks and now just get to come right back with no repercussions.
Whew.
It's crazy.
Ooh, it's not going to be all hugs at the family barbecue. We'll put it that way. It's,
oh my
there's gonna be
gosh,
some stuff, but yeah,
So, Jamie, Jomez now a part of the tour. Talk about crazy mergers. There's another crazy merger. How does that affect what you're working on? And like, does that open up new doors for what you all can do in terms of post-produced type content?
Yeah, it's been, obviously merging two companies like that are so established in disc golf and have such like a forward position in people's minds. It definitely takes a lot of careful planning. So big shout out to the whole team that was involved in getting that done. And can I just like toot our own horn a little bit and kept it under wraps? I didn't hear of a single leak, and that it was in the works for a very long time before it was announced. So kudos to everybody involved. The more eagle-eyed viewers out there will probably have noticed back at the beginning of this year that we actually integrated the Jomez and the Disc Golf Network coverage product at the start of the year at the Las Vegas Challenge. So if you didn't notice and you were worried about, oh, what's going to happen now that Jomez and the Pro Tour are merged, you didn't even know it happened. It's been like that the whole year. So, we're obviously huge fans of what they've done and look up to just the resilience and the tenacity that they've had to maintain their position in the sport. And now that we're together, it's just a super strong team. I mean, I'm so excited to work with some of those guys that are coming over to help with some of these cinematic projects. Working on coverage week in and week out, it's great, but it's like working out one muscle all the time. You just go to the gym and all you do is bicep curls. You like skip leg day. So I think, these guys are also very excited to continue to put out more different types of content and just to have a team around them that can support different types of things that we want to do and allow all the ideas to come in and all the resources to be put to those ideas and see what comes out the other side.
Well, what can you tell us about? I'm sure you have some secret projects that you can't talk about, but what can you talk about in terms of things that are coming up at some point in the next 6 to 9 months?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll fish for an invite back on the show later in the year where I can reveal some of the big stuff. There are some things that I can't talk about yet that we are actively working on that I'm like super excited about. Like literally had a meeting last night on one project, but if you've been paying attention to Jomez or to Disc Golf Network, you might have seen our Finding the Line series. We went to Montenegro last year to document the first course in the country. Finding the Lines will be back at the beginning of this off season. We are working on a little project called Cactus Rock. They have an Instagram. I'll just say, if you haven't found out about Cactus Rock, check out Cactus Rock DG on Instagram. It's a really cool project. It does involve a current MLB pitcher by the name of Mr. Dylan Cease. Involves Paul McBeth. Very cool project happening up there. We also are going to be bringing back some of the Jomez favorites. I'll leave that as a little teaser, but some things that you loved from Jomez are going to get even more attention and even more resources to help take them to the next level. So there's lots of good stuff. You're going to want to be a year-round content watcher in disc golf going forward. I can tell you that much.
Interesting stuff. So, Jamie, like what, I know you're not in the tournament grind anymore. What tournament are you most looking forward to coming up the rest of this year?
Ooh, I'm interested to see how D-Glow plays as a playoff event. Obviously that's a tough tournament, and it has a lot of cachet with players, especially that came up through the amateur competitive ranks. And they did just host their amateur national championship this past weekend. So having that as a playoff event with even more stakes put on it, I think will be really cool. And I mean, come on, man, Worlds at Smugs, you just can't beat it. I remember 5 years ago sitting out on the patio doing the podcast with you and just like looking around like, where are we? And like, this is just a new world. So I'm very excited for that tournament.
It's going to be awesome.
What's sticking out to you? What's on your radar right now?
Well, I'm just so pumped for the European tournaments.
Of course.
Like just in general, but I think European Open this year for the first time is going to feel like a true major with the depth of field that makes it feel like a major for the first time ever. We've had some top pros go over and like, it's cool. And, obviously last year we got this amazing battle between Eagle and Paul, but there wasn't a deep field of players. But, when you go and you scroll down the list of people who's going to Europe this year, it's not every single player, but the vast majority of top 50 disc golfers are going to be there. And so that I'm super excited for because it's already an awesome event. Now you have all the top players there. It's the next major. That's the other thing. We got we wetted our whistle with Champions Cup, but now like full swing of the season and kind of sets up the second half. So I'm definitely, that's what's circled on my calendar.
Tip of the cap to Sula as well. They really showed something last year, and being right before European Open to, the week before to get more pros out there. Like, I think that tournament's going to be sneaky, like really one of the better tournaments of the year, honestly.
I agree. Completely agree. I think it's going to be a true elite event because the same thing, all the players are already going to be there. So they're going to go there to Norway and then they're going to go to Finland.
Definitely.
So yeah, pumped. We're less than a month away. So, Jamie, thanks for joining me today. We'll see you back here on Thursday as we get ready for DDO.
I'm excited, man. Feels like old times. I cannot wait. Thanks for having me.
All right. For Jamie Thomas, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you Thursday. Got a couple great interviews coming, and we'll talk to you then.